Hey, now it's the Rob from 106.1 KISS FM here with my 16-bit colleague.
Hey guys, it's Steve, web contributor to 1061evansville.com.
That's right, and if anything, we are certainly the best dressed video podcast on the internet, I think, at least in the world of video games.
Yes.
My goodness, we are looking good. Steve, today's topic is going to be a lot of fun. We are both going to build the Mount Rushmore of video games. And it's important to, I think, talk about what Mount Rushmore is, because I don't know if there was a specific criteria about what put those four faces on Mount Rushmore, but I feel like they were probably going for the people who shaped the country the most, who made it what they were today. And I want to do that with video game characters. So it's not necessarily our four favorite video game characters, but four of the most important video game characters that have ever been assembled. Right. So Steve, have you put this together?
I have put this together. My first face is going to be a split screen.
Okay.
Because it's a new age, so not all faces have to be one face, but it needs to be a split screen. It's going to be...
I think I know who that is. All right, here we go. I, mind you, have no visual aids this time.
This is Bill Reiser and Lance Bean from Contra.
So say those look like the guys from Contra. My goodness.
I believe, in my opinion, they were the first side-scrolling fighter games that were named. I think they're responsible for like the Double Dragons and maybe even the person-on-person fighter games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. So this split-screen face of these two characters that were modeled after Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone.
That's right.
Be my first face.
I have heard that before. And if I'm not mistaken, while not the first game to use the Konami code, it went on to be called the Contra code. That game was so important. The up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start kind of deal. You know what I'm talking about. Video game fans know what I'm talking about. All right, so that's one face.
That's the first face.
Okay, who's the second face?
The second face I'm going to sculpt is going to be Pac-Man. He's the first, to my knowledge, he's the first named character in video gaming. I mean, you think video games, he has to be one of the names you think of. I mean, he has the maze, he's done cartoons, he's had cereal, he has toys. I mean, he's just branched off in many, so his face is definitely going to be up there as well.
That makes a lot of sense to me. We may talk more about Pac-Man later.
My next face, sorry guys.
It's okay. I'm excited to see who you come up with. So far, so good.
Is the Italian plumber, Mario himself.
And I think any Mount Rushmore video games is incomplete without Mario on it.
Yeah.
So obviously I have thoughts on this, but what do you want to say about Mario?
Mario is, in my opinion, the second most important character of all time, and I'll get into that in a minute. And I know me and Rob will disagree on this.
Sure, go ahead.
But, I mean, again, he's branched movies, cartoons, any type of video game, golf, board game, I mean, just a Mario brother. I mean, you know Hulk Hogan, you know Godzilla, you know Mario. Regardless if you're a fan, you know who they are.
He is, if anyone is bigger than the video game business, it is Super Mario.
And my last face on my Mount Rushmore is what I believe is the most important video game character. And I know Rob disagrees, we've had this discussion before, but if it wasn't for this character, I don't believe there'd be a Mario. That's Donkey Kong. He would be my fourth and final face on my Mount Rushmore.
Okay, so go ahead, explain what you think.
There was a game in 1980 called Donkey Kong. At the bottom of that screen, when you start that game, you play as Jumpman. Jumpman went on to become Mario. That's my train of thought.
Well, my train of thought is, if Donkey Kong is the most important for bringing us Mario, doesn't that in fact imply that Mario is the biggest and most important name in games? In my opinion, it does. Do you want to talk about my four names here?
Yes.
Okay, so I've got a few. Some of them are on the same page. In fact, half of my Mount Rushmore will look the same as yours. I'm going in somewhat of a chronological order here. And I actually put two lists together because one I think might be kind of cheating. So I have a backup if you do think that that's cheap. So here's what we have here. The four faces on my Mount Rushmore video games. First, name that you mentioned, Pac-Man. Thank you very much. Pac-Man, in my opinion, was the first superstar of video games. Pac-Man became a household name, and Pac-Man was really responsible for the popular rise in video games in the early 80s. It's feasible that there would not have been home consoles without a superstar like Pac-Man to bring them to the masses.
Yes.
So that's the first thing, and while Pac-Man, I mean, it's a good game. It's not one of my favorites. He belongs on Mount Rushmore of video games. Yes. Secondly, as does Mario, who came out a few years later. Mario, when you compared him to the Hulk Hogan of video games, what you mean by that is not that he does a crappy leg drop, but that he is bigger than everyone around him.
Yeah.
In a world of thousands and thousands of video game characters, Mario has found a way to stand out. Mario has found a way to endure. Mario is still very relevant. Just this past week, I bought Mario Party because Mario is still cool. And Mario will always be cool because he's the biggest and the best in the name of video games.
Yeah.
Now, here's where I'm going to get things complicated because I have two alternate versions here. If we're talking about the Mount Rushmore of video games, and we're talking about who has shaped video games, I feel like there are two real human beings who belong on that list.
Okay.
But I do think that's kind of cheating because I think that we're talking about video game characters. Okay. So the two humans I want to put on the list are Shinjiro Miyamoto, who, you know, everyone knows him. He's the guy who he's the face of Nintendo. He created Mario. He created the Legend of Zelda. He created all of Nintendo's humongous franchises. He is the father of video games. And the second real face I'd put on the Mount Rushmore of video games is Steve Wozniak, who, if Miyamoto is the father of video games, Steve Wozniak is the grandfather. He did to Atari what Miyamoto did to Nintendo. Now, Atari predates me a little bit. Of course, I played it growing up, but Atari was very important in putting video games into the home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas it used to be something people would go out to bowling alleys to play or to arcades to play. Wozniak is the guy who put all the time and effort into Atari's big franchises and got it into the home, which made it humongous, which made it relatable to everybody. And everyone had one.
Yes.
Everyone had an Atari. And it's also feasible to think that there would not be an NES and subsequently a Nintendo without Steve Wozniak putting the Atari in everyone's living rooms first.
Agreed.
So let's just say, Rob, BS, you can't put real faces on the Mount Rushmore video games. The two other video game characters I'm going to put on there would be Link from Legend of Zelda.
I kind of knew that. Yeah, I was ready.
You're good. I think Link has a spot on there because he left an indelible print on video games with the original Legend of Zelda. And that changed the way video games were played. Now, if you want to talk about first, sure, that was the first game to have a gold cartridge. That's kind of aesthetically cool. Yeah. It was the first game to have a battery backup save, which became commonplace eventually. What he did to the industry, though, far exceeds those things on the physical cartridge. The way people look at adventuring, the way people get engrossed in video games and feel like they're part of a world, that happened when Link started running around Hyrule, in my opinion. Yeah. It was unlike any other game, and still has a tremendous impact on video games. Link deserves a spot on the Mount Rushmore of video games, in my opinion. Last but not least, this may be a controversial one, but I feel like the fourth and final name video game character on my Mount Rushmore is Sonic the Hedgehog. Was that who you thought I was going with? Very good, Steve. That is Sonic.
Yeah.
Sonic represents to me an interesting time in video games, and maybe the highlight of video games, but let me explain here. Sonic's games nowadays suck, and it did not take long for them to suck. There were 3 or 4 good games on the Sega Genesis, and then Sonic got mismanaged. But Sonic represented competition.
Yes. And
competition in every form of business is positive to the user.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about television, whether you're talking about video games, or whether you're talking about music, keeping someone on their toes is extremely important. And that's what Sonic did, and is what Sonic represents to me. Nintendo was always superior. Yes. In my opinion, in almost every stretch of the imagination, Super Nintendo was better than Sega Genesis. But Sonic kept them honest. Yeah. And Sonic did do a whole lot. And those first games, to me, are a big part of my childhood. Sonic 1 and 2 especially, I put a lot of hours into. So I feel like he deserves a spot. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I could. He definitely is in the running. If
Yeah.
he doesn't make the final cut, he's definitely up there.
And you know what? One of the few faces where I bet you if you showed Sonic's picture to kids today, would they still recognize who he was?
Yeah.
You know, so there you go. Those are the names that we're putting on the Mount Rushmore of video games. We threw a lot at you there, but if you have thoughts, please feel free to email us. And of course, next Wednesday we'll be back with another edition of the 16-Bit Superstars. For myself, the Rob, for Steve.
Thanks, guys.